We are back. Vibe check. We're live and we've got a new episode for everybody today. Thank you again for all those who are out there and joining. Happy to see you and happy to get into talking about sandboxing skills and surviving dev to prod. So today we have James Bayer, who is the CPO at Flox, who's joining us, and we're happy to have you. And, you know, James knows a lot of things around trying to make sure that our environments are consistent and survivable and stable for us, especially in the world we're living in right now. Cecil, Phillip, who is, of course, one of my regular co-hosts now. So thanks, Cecil, for continuing to join me here at Temporal. Been really enjoying working with you on all the things around DevRel. So we're going to get into this. James, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Flox?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This is going to be really fun. So I've been in infrastructure software for quite a long time. I've recently worked at places like Pivotal Software, HashiCorp. I started my own cloud company for a little while, and now I'm at this company called Flox. And so I've just really enjoyed being like close to developers and working on products that they're experiencing. And what we do at Flox is we make reproducible software environments. And so what that means is if you think about something like Docker, where you put all the software you want to use into a container, but the container is also used for isolation. At Flox, we basically think we should separate the mechanism of packaging software from the mechanism of isolation. If you want to run that package in a container, great. If you don't, if you want to run it on bare metal or your regular operating system or in the cloud or in CI, it should all work the same way without having necessarily to put it in a container. And so that's essentially what we work on in Flox. And who really cares about this are usually it's platform teams that want to standardize or share the software and have a lot of people have the same experience that you have on development on one machine, on a different development machine, or in CI or in prod, and have that consistency across all those different environments.
I know when I work with Python on a regular basis, like I'm regularly using some kind of Vim. So this makes me think of that.
Yeah, Python virtual environments is definitely something that people use as a point of comparison. And I think that the kind of different way of thinking about Flox is we're trying to be like a universal layer because we're operating at the layer beneath the application runtime. And so it's like you'll see in the demo in a little bit that we can manage things like basic utilities like tree and watch and other like Unix utilities you might have, all the way through things like AI harnesses like Claude, and with configuring the temporal skill and making sure that it's all shared and consistent. And so it's very similar to Python virtual environments, but at a more universal layer than that.
Makes sense. All right. Well, you want to show us the demo?
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, let's get into it.
Right.
So let me
Let's get into it.
swipe over into, tell me when
and I'm going to remove this and add this. There we go. We got it.
Okay, cool. So what you're seeing is my Mac desktop right now, and I'm going to show you kind of like a temporal environment running, but I wanted to show you, first of all, this is, Dr. Desktop not running any containers. I'm going to be running all of this first part of this without any containerization. And so right now, if I type Flox, I have Flox installed. It's going to show me if I have any active environments here. And one of them is the default environment. And so if I just say Flox list, this is a command that will list stuff that's running in that default environment. You'll notice things like this, like I have this apple here on my prompt. That's just to show me that if I type uname, that I'm actually on Darwin. I'm not running in a container or anything like that. And so I'm going to use the same terminal to go in and out of containers and other things. And so like that prompt kind of like shows me a little bit of where I'm at. And you'll see that I'll switch to a penguin later when we're in Linux. But if I type Flox list and show my default environment, earlier I was talking about some of the common utilities I might want to have everywhere I go. So for me, that's things like the GitHub CLI, JQ, tree, Vim, watch, wget. There's a whole bunch of things people might like to have wherever they are. And so that's what a default environment is. So whenever I type in, have a new shell and I type Flox, I'm always in that default environment and the way I have things, configured for me on my machine. So right now I'm in this, I'll clear this out. I'm in a directory called Temporal, And I have a Flox environment configured in this directory, which sets up how I might want to use Temporal. So I've got the Temporal skills. This is coming from the official upstream, Temporal GitHub site that publishes your skill for working with Temporal when you're using AI tools. I've got the Temporal CLI, and I've got some other tools. I decided to use the Golang Hello World example. So I have the Go environment there. And so right now when I type, which Go, I don't have it on my path because I haven't entered the environment yet. But if I type Flox activate, what will happen is all of this software will magically become on my path. And so another thing that can happen, when you enter the environment by typing Flox activate is whoever's maintaining this environment can print out helpful messages, like, similar to a README to tell you what to do. So like I said earlier, Go wasn't on my path, but I've said, which Go now? I do have Go on my path now. So that environment is all set up. So I've got Temporal, I've got Claude, I've got the skill, I've got it all set up and ready to go. And
Nice.
one of the things you can do with Flox is I've started services. So if I say Flox services status, just running this, helpful command that I had reminded myself, I see I'm running the temporal server and a worker, right? And so this can make it really easy. We're using Temporal as an example, but anytime you want to share something that has a set of services that need to be running in the background, whether that's a Postgres database or something like that, Redis, these are things that you can do with Flox, and so it's not only just shipping the bits for the packages themselves, like the Temporal CLI, but it's also any kind of process orchestration you want to do in the background. And then this, I think your viewers are probably mostly familiar with this kind of stuff, but if I wanted to run that example, so I'll just say this is James Wednesday at 11:07. I've run a new workflow here, and I can go bring up the Temporal UI. And if I go check that out, James Wednesday, 11:07, right?
Nice.
So
I like how you also decided to put in Wednesday 11:07 just to really prove that this was not pre-baked.
Exactly. Yeah, this is live. What could go wrong with a live demo?
Nothing at all.
We've got the ability to get logs out of this, and I could put other kinds of software in here. So that's all great, but one of the things that I'm doing is I'm running this directly on macOS. And so if I'm doing things like you've all probably seen the package manager supply chain attacks that have been happening recently, or if I'm going to be launching Claude directly from here, and I want Claude to be doing stuff, maybe I don't want Claude to be manipulating everything on my desktop. I want to contain it a bit. So if I wanted to use a sandbox with this, if you go back and look at that directory structure, I did include a dev container file here. And so what I want to show now is that same environment can be running inside of a container. So I have another Flox environment here I just opened up a new shell here where I have dev container CLI loaded onto my path, which is coming from a Flox environment. But I'm in the temporal directory, and what I have it set up to do is if I cd into a directory that has a .dev container file, then I automatically start up. Oh, you know what I did? I forgot to exit out of this, so that I already have the port running because I reserved it. I'm running a service. So let's try this again and clear out of this. There we go. So this same environment that we were sawing running on my Mac, which I had that little apple, now I've got the little penguin, right? And this is showing me that I am inside of a container that is the host of the container. So 5C33, if I go over to dock or desktop now, I'll see 5C33 is the container ID. And you'll notice that the port is mapped through and everything. So I'm running this same Flox environment inside of a container. And so now I have a lot more confidence in whatever I'm doing here has a little bit of a boundary between my local workstation and what I do here. I still am bind mounting in that project directory. So that same directory that was on my Mac, I have now bind mounted into the container so I can work on it. So the Go hello world stuff all works. If I click on the port, it still comes up because I've mapped that port through. But this makes it much more straightforward to easily go from working on that software environment straight on my workstation, which is not contained, to going right into a dev container. And I have VS Code and other things that respect the dev container thing. So I can like be working on an IDE and still working with my container, and that all works just the same as well. So pretty cool to be able to have these repeatable software environments, run them on your workstation directly, run them in a container. In this case, I'm running it in a Docker container. And the kind of one other thing I wanted to show you, if you're interested, I don't know, Apple made a bunch of news at WWDC the last few weeks, where they have something called Apple Container, which is basically slightly different approach than Docker. So with Docker, when you're on macOS, they use a single virtual machine for multiple Docker containers. So that would mean if for some reason, if you're really paranoid, that there is a kernel exploit in one container, that they could see the contents of other containers. And so Apple Container has made a kind of different design decision. I can kind of show you this here. They've done this thing where every single container you start up with Apple Container gets its own micro VM. And so what I've done here is I've created a different Flox environment that when I've activated it, kind of prints out this helpful message. And I have a demo project here that I'll show you the contents of this. So if I look at the demo project, I've created a similar, standard in my, this is a James made up standard. There's, in dev container, you have a .dev container folder, and inside of that, you have a dev container.json that tells you like which image to use, which ports to map, and things like that. So I've done the same thing, but with Apple Container. And so if I CD into the demo project, this will start up that container for me automatically. So now if you notice my prompt changed from the apple to the penguin, I am running in an Apple Container image within a micro VM. And so this has extra protection compared to the way dev container works, because now every single container is its own micro VM. And so that's a kind of a different, more isolated approach. And, happy to answer any questions about that if people have that. The other thing that Apple showcased at WWDC is a new feature of Apple Container called Container Machine. So I'm in another directory here. It happens to be another Flox environment that you can see there. And if I type Flox list, it has a hello package. So that means if I say hello, nothing happens because I'm not in the Flox environment yet. But if I say Flox activate, now I'm there. And if I type hello, it works. So this is all on Darwin, and everything is, local to my workstation here. If I, exit out of that environment and I say container machine run, this works a lot more like how WSL2 does on Windows, where there can be a persistent virtual machine always running. And when I type that, you'll notice if I went into the dev container earlier, if I said, who am I made that a Flox user. But this actually takes my Apple user and brings it with me into the Linux virtual machine that's running that they call the container machine. So all of my workspaces from my local directory are now mounted inside. These are all of my projects that I have, Temporal being one of them. On my Mac OS, I'm bringing that all with me, as well as my dot files. So my tilde / dot files that are like, if I'm logged into Claude or whatever, like that stuff would come with me. So it's a really interesting new option from Apple to like more directly integrate Linux with their operating system. And you have the ability to run those containers in isolated virtual machines, by default. So I thought that's a really cool recent addition from Apple. And it's not quite the same as Docker. They don't have like a fancy UI around this yet, but they do have, if I type, container list, it shows me, similar to Docker, all the containers that are running on my machine. It's just like they're shipping their own container runtime directly in macOS now, similar to Windows WSL2.
Nice. So James, you covered
No, go ahead.
so much amazing stuff.
Yeah.
I want to take a second and step back a little bit because I feel like there's so many questions I have just based on what you've showed in like the last 10 minutes. So when you showed us, activating that Flux environment, I guess we could call it, and then you made that comment about, it's kind of like Docker, and we're setting up our dev environments and all these types of things. I know when I think about setting up a dev environment, and I'm a macOS user. Okay. I think, I'm going to use Homebrew, and Homebrew is going to go into outer space and pull things into my machine, right? I'm going to use a Docker container for Redis or some database thing or whatever. I'm going to go into outer space and pull stuff into my machine, right? Does Flox work a similar way? Like, are you, when I say, hey, I need
very
these
similar
things, do you go into some registry and you're pulling the things on my machine?
Yeah. So let's do Flox help, and we can kind of walk through that. And you're exactly right. It works very similarly. So they're a very standard package manager. So Flox is built around the Nix ecosystem. So if you know what Nix, and Nix is the largest package management ecosystem in the world. There's around 120,000 packages in this ecosystem. It's a 20-year-old open source project. And the reason we can be so confident that these environments work the same across different developer machines or CI or production or in a remote sandbox is because the Nix ecosystem cryptographically guarantees each package in their system is the same. And so we are built around this large community. And so there are commands like, list, which lists the packages that I've already taken from outer space and brought down. But I can do things like Flox search. And so give me the names, Cecil, of your favorite package that you would want to look for. I don't know.
Temporal.
Temporal. All right. That's a good one. Good answer. So here you see a bunch of temporal related projects that people have available in upstream Nix packages. So like, the UI server, here's the skills that I didn't quite get to that point of showing you the skill working, but I can go back into demonstrating that as well. And so and once I find one that I want, the command is just Flox install, right? So I already have the temporal CLI installed in this case, so I won't, do that. But that's all it is Flox install, temporal CLI. If I did this, it probably tells me that, I already have it. So Flox search to find those packages, Flox install to actually install them, and Flox list to see which ones you've got in that local environment. There's a complete web UI for all of this. So if you go to hub.flox.dev, and I can actually kind of scroll over that quickly. So hub.flox.dev. This is, I wonder why it did that. I thought I was logged in. So we'll see if I... I'm going to
remove that from the screen while you log in.
So yeah, here we go. Here's a bunch of environments that I have. And if I go to, to the package search, I can search for, again, we'll use that temporal example, do search. So there's a web experience, there's a CLI experience, and it all works kind of the same way as a traditional package manager like Brew would, in that it's search, install, list, uninstall, very, very similar to package manager commands. I think the big difference with Flox from a traditional package manager is we are trying to think of this as a team sport, like whether that's a platform team or a DevX team trying to share a bunch of stuff, or it's just an individual trying to share configurations between different developer machines and your CI and your production. We really want to make these environments portable so that a person can publish software into the package library, we call it a catalog, and then have other people consume that. And we consume them in an environment, which is a group of packages, and then you can make those environments shareable as well. So that temporal environment, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. You finish your thought, and then I'm going to ask you a question about the environment.
Yeah, so that temporal environment that I was showing you, that is something we can put in the resources to the show or whatever. It's available for other. So if I go just click on environments here, I'll show you that this is my temporal
All your
environment.
environments?
It's yeah, these are all my environments. This one is public. Here's my one-liner that I can do as a copy, and anybody can run that environment that I was just demonstrating to you on my machine on their machine. So it's a, you know, in some ways analogous to Docker, because you can say Docker run something, or, you know, those kinds of things, and refer to the image. In this case, it's, you know, my username / the environment name. And that's pretty much it. And it'll download all of the packaged software that I need, as well as the recursive dependencies, and make that available on those machines that, you know, invoke that.
And for the environment, is there like a file that's like a config file type of situation? And
yes, absolutely.
would you be able to
Great
show
question.
us what that looks like, or
Yeah,
what an
so
example looks like?
I think the easiest way to do this, so there's a .flox directory that I was showing people, and we have a manifest.toml file that kind of, you know, structures these.
And
are
would
the
you be able
packages.
to zoom in a little bit on that, or make that a little bigger?
Sorry.
Perfect.
Yeah. So this is a manifest.toml file that shows the packages, and so these are the names of the packages, and the package group is just like a mechanism of isolation. You don't really have to worry about that too much. So every one of the packages can be referenced here. These are variables that I would set. These are, you know, how I made that pretty banner at the top when I launched the environment, and provided the instructions like this is how you search the logs or show the logs. So those are kinds of things that you can set up in this manifest toml. We also have, and I think Temporal has one of as well, a pretty nice Flox UI on this. So like these are all the installed packages for VS Code plugin, right? And the way to set the variables, way to show the services. So all that stuff is available in VS Code if you don't want to directly manipulate the toml file yourself. Most of the times people use the Flox commands, the imperative commands like Flox install, to add packages. They don't directly go to the manifest.toml yourself, but, you know, advanced users do.
Nice. So when people are going to be using this, like, or I guess actually the question I want to ask you is more, you know, with the trying to get that consistency, trying to make sure that it's, you know, it's a commonly used setup for everybody who's doing development. It makes sense to me. I think the thing that I'm wondering is, do you have any specific pain points that you're seeing a lot of in the like AI development space that this is serving in particular?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think that a big one are things like skills. So what I notice, and I'll clear this out and we'll list the packages again so I can do this part of the demo. There's skills I've noticed get very hard to keep in sync across people. So we you know, remember when Claude Design came out, like, I don't know, a couple months ago? We created our design system in Claude Design and started sharing it around. Well, the first version really sucked, but we made a skill and we shared it in Slack, and people downloaded the sucky version. And then one of our designers really kept improving it, making it better, making it better, making it better. But everyone still had the crappy one in their environments registered on their Claude. And so that you know, it was driving some of our, you know, leadership team nuts when people would create these artifacts that they wanted with our nice brand and, you know, the font looking right. And they're like, why does this asset look bad? It was like, well, it was because you're using the old version of the skill. And so whenever you have these kinds of situations, and skills, I think, are more like software. You know, people think they're a markdown file with, you know, some, you know, basically a YAML front matter that describes some metadata about the skill, and that's basically it. But if you go look in the subdirectories, you can embed Python and Bash and a whole bunch of other stuff. It eventually becomes a skill is software. So we believe at Flox that you should treat skills like they're software. You should lifecycle manage them. You should know that when you're on one machine with its configured one way, skills should be, you know, that same way. So I'm going to show you registering Claude here. So we have this thing called Flox AI that will help things like register my skill properly with Claude. And so if I launch Claude, this is the normal Claude. I'm logged in as James, And if I say, do you have the temporal skill available? This should list that there. And so, yes, the temporal developer skill is available. And so I happen to use Whisperflow a lot when I'm using Claude. So I can do something like, I have a sample workflow in this directory that is a hello world Golang example with temporal. Can you add a goodbye workflow to this hello world example so that that is invoked from the hello workflow? And voila, what should happen now is Claude should invoke the temporal developer skill. We see that happening, and it would start reading the files and start manipulating this. And because it's using that skill, if I had the old version of the skill or didn't have it configured right, it wouldn't know how to do this, right? And so I think that's really a valuable part of managing software within the AI world in particular. You have these harnesses, you've got the sandboxes, you've got skills, you've got hooks and prompts. And these things, if you want them to have some consistency, like a lot of people talk about AI being non-deterministic, have as much consistency and determinism in the substrate underneath the AI.
Nice. Yeah, I know there's a significant amount of work right now trying to create that certainty and reliability in the tooling and the environments around what is being launched into production for AI.
Yes.
Yeah, James, I got a quick question for you. So now that you're talking about using Flux and creating an environment for our agent harnesses and those types of things, does Flux do anything, or does it help us with anything regards to like secrets management? So I've heard a lot of people talking about having like their API keys and those types of things inside of the prompts and all kinds of stuff going on. Like how can Flux help us with that?
Yeah, great question. So I'll show you that we have a pattern for this in our docs. I can't even remember exactly. I'll just type secrets. So yeah, secrets management is a concept. And so this kind of explained it because we can set environment variables and other things. The common pattern is a developer authenticates with the secret store. For me, I'm using Keychain for macOS, but you could be using that with 1Password, HashiCorp Vault. I used to work on HashiCorp Vault, so I'm a big fan of that. And the way you do that is once the developer authenticates during the Flox activate, that's when you inject the secrets into environment variables. And then, that way the secrets are not encoded into the environment cryptographically beforehand. They're just in time loaded into the environment. And so that's the common pattern there. So sometimes people will use some kind of biometric authentication with 1Password, like, put their fingerprint on the reader, things like that. But that's the general pattern.
Got it.
Nice.
And so then you talking about essentially like a Flux environment kind of sounds like a template, right? And a thing that I could like ship to the hub and I can pull it back down. So some of these, I guess we can say recommended practices, you can kind of bake it into the template. So as I'm sharing it with my team, whether we're talking about AI or working with Temporal or any of these types of things, we all kind of just have a consistent way of working with things. So I don't have to worry about, my team doesn't have to worry about Cecil putting the API key in the thing because we've already created like a structure to prevent that.
Absolutely. So one of the common ways people use Flox is exactly that, those kinds of patterns. It is having that day one productivity on a new project so that I can just have the equivalent of Flox activate and it's got the secrets I needed. It has the software I need. And so we'll see just like teams of developers, like for onboarding reasons or making sure they have secure practices, encode those opinions and those standards in the Flox environment. So when people show up and they type Flox activate, the right things just happen. And that is, whether that's a platform team, a DevX team, or just whoever the lead is on a project, whenever there's sharing involved, it's in sharing those standards is a very common use of Flox.
And then anybody who wants to update the standards or add something to it, they can as a group. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So I'll give you a great example of one that I really like is a lot of us probably type npm install or pnpm install or pip install ourselves without using package firewalls. Well, there are lots of cool package firewalls out there like socket.dev. And so you can even teach an alias for when someone types npm install, that it always goes through the package firewall to make sure that if there is compromised software, it doesn't get, accidentally installed on your machine or have your agent install that. And so Flox can set up that socket.dev configuration to just work, or whatever package firewall you want to use. So it's like, it could be a security practice. It could be a developer convenience thing, so that, you have the right version of the temporal CLI, whatever the thing is, and it's encoding those practices.
Cool.
Got it.
Well, and so I'm going to go and ask you that question I like to ask everybody, James, in terms of, I know we've already seen a little bit about your flow, but can you speak to a little bit about how you use AI tooling in when you're building, when you're developing, however you're using it within your workday?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I've followed a similar journey to a lot of people, where I originally started using AI tools with the original ChatGPT and that kind of query response mechanism as an alternative to Stack Overflow. I was like writing some scripts and I was like, oh, this is like a faster way to get the answer than searching on Stack Overflow and filtering through the responses. And that kind of query response thing I used that for many months. And it wasn't, I'd say, until this last December, when the models really made big advances, when I started using, Claude Code directly myself in the CLI. And when I started doing that, that was like a whole, like leap forward in terms of like, mind-blowing progress in terms of like, you can do really powerful things in short amounts of time. So I've been using Claude Code that way. And I originally went from like unprotected using Claude Code, where it just like, had access to my machine and I sure hope it doesn't do anything bad, to whereas like all the supply chain stuff, I started switching into using Claude Code within a sandbox, a local sandbox. So both with dev containers, and now I'm increasingly using Apple Container because I just really like the simplicity and ease of use of it. But I think what we're seeing now is like in this, because this is like hot off the presses this week, like yesterday, the Claude S, I think they call it tasks or something like this, where you can be in Slack and you just mention Claude and assign it work and it just goes and does it. But it's similar to how things would have been as if I had Claude Code set up and gave it a specific task. Except I can, like, my user experience has shifted from, prompting in a web UI to being in a terminal and being, actually probably the intermediate step is being in an IDE with a, sidecar companion. And then it shifted to terminal Claude Code style or codex style interaction. And now I think it's going to possibly shift again to like meeting you where you are. Like if you use Linear or Jira or some kind of issue system, I know people use, GitHub issues. It seems like these agents will be more embedded in those experiences. So I'm on this journey of, different ways of engaging with these agents. The one I most predominantly use right now is Claude Code, but I'm already seeing around the corner for how people on my team are using Linear, and they reference the agent in a comment in Linear, and things just happen, as opposed to them like setting up a full local sandbox with Claude Code or Codex in it. So it's really interesting. Like this compression of changes of user experience have happened a lot in, let's say, a year. And so I have no idea where it's all going, but I know that being adaptable is a really big like value of not being too attached to one workflow, because there's better and better ways being, shown to us for how to engage with these things.
Agree. And I'm going to switch us back in a second. I appreciate you going through all that, because it is one of those things where you do have to continually keep adapting. I'm going to switch us back and bring up Adam Heavener, who, by the way, had also given you a shout out earlier, was asking before, when you were talking about pip and npm, are there any skill firewalls similar to pip and npm that you've seen?
Yes, actually there are. So there's a lot of, so I know NVIDIA has one, and we've actually packaged that as a skill. So I can see if I can find it. I'll just go look quickly, but we one from, I think they call it Skillinator. I'll just check here to see. I wish I recalled.
That's okay.
Let's see.
Real time,
Yeah,
figuring it out.
Maybe skill validator. I'll have to see, but I know Sneak has one. I think Wiz has one. NVIDIA has one. Skills.sh will do that. Comes from Vercel. They do a basic one. So, what we're doing with Flox is looking at when we packaged that temporal skill, we went to your upstream GitHub repo and we made it a Flox package. And we want to make that process include things like scanning, so that you can make sure that whatever you're distributing via Flox has been at least scanned once, and hopefully multiple, in an ongoing way, to make sure that it's safe and not vulnerable to, I saw one of my colleagues presented at an AI conference and did some research and found out that somewhere around 25% of skills have vulnerabilities in them. Maybe not like compromised software, but they're doing something unsafe. And so you should really treat skills like software, and whatever, if software is untrusted, then you should run it in a sandbox. If a skill is untrusted, you should run it in a sandbox. And before you even run it, make sure you have some sense of what's in it. And so there are some good open source ones out there, as well as commercial options.
Nice. Well, James, I really appreciate the fact that you have gone through sharing about sandboxing, how to think about it, especially in terms of being able to share shared environments across teams within projects. Anything else that you wanted to cover before we start to wrap up? Because, it's been a good conversation and we're already getting close to our time.
No, I'm really, I guess one thing I would say, I think I shared with you, there's a Flox in 5 minutes. I can just pull this example up. If people want to get started with Flox, this Flox in 5 minutes tutorial is a great way to kind of dip your toe in the water. It just looks like cloning a GitHub repo and following some instructions. Takes less than 5 minutes. So if people want to kind of like experience what I showcased today, but like in a simpler way, that's the best way to get started. And we'd love to answer questions. Follow up, you can reach out to me with my contact information, or reach out to our community Slack. We'd love to engage with folks.
Thanks.
And James, I'm guessing, I'm sorry, Melanie, 1 second.
No, go for it, Cecil, because I was going to ask you if you had any additional questions as well.
I was wondering, so Flox is open source, right? Like I know you all have GitHub organizations and those types of things. So if people wanted to get involved, they could always send you some issues, send you some feedback over there. And I'm guessing they could even just start publishing their own Flox bundles. Is that what you call them? Bundles, packages?
Yeah, we call them Flox environments.
Okay.
So yeah, Flox is free to get started with. So there's an open source CLI. We have a server side aspect of it that is hosted software that we run as a SaaS. And for customers that are really worried about privacy, we have the ability to install that server side on their infrastructure. So, but the vast majority of users use our free SaaS. And then there are paid options for larger groups of teams with enterprise features like single sign-on and those kinds of things. But yeah, it's really easy to get started with. You can open issues, join our community Slack, and it's free to get started. So yeah, that's how we recommend people getting started is try the Flox in 5 minutes and progress to one of the other tutorials. So like you can see here, like here's how to create your first environment, and here's how to set up your default environment. The default environment I think is a really cool one, because I don't use Brew anymore on my machine, because I like being able to have essentially a definitive source of truth where I can define all of the places I want my standard utilities, whether I'm in a cloud shell, where I'm on my laptop, whether I'm in a container. I can know that all of those utilities are at the same version, whether on Mac or on Linux. And so I think the default environment is a really cool thing that Flox offers.
Nice. Go ahead, Cecil. Was there anything else that you want to make sure we dove into before we start to wrap up?
No, that was really it, right? I just wanted to make our folks that are watching know that, one, it's open source. I think that's important to a lot of folks.
I agree.
To know. And again, if maybe there's a package that they want to contribute to, or it doesn't exist yet and like they'd love to add it, like they could just go sign up for free, download the CLI, it sounds like, and then they could start publishing to the Flox Hub, where you know a lot of us can all start remixing and using like those different environments together.
Yeah, so we have a build and publish packages. I think another great way that I should showcase one other thing I didn't mention yet is we have, just like you all have a skill, we have a set of skills called Flox Agentic. And if we look inside here, these are all of our skills that describe how to build packages, use it with containers. CUDA is an NVIDIA GPU thing, but how to publish things. So you don't have to really get super knowledgeable about Flox. You can just talk to your agent and ask it to do stuff, and it will do stuff on your behalf using these skills. So that's a great way to get started with Flox, is like, using Claude or Codex or whatever favorite agent you have. You can load the Flox skills into that, and that's another great way to get started, where you don't have to put in all the hard work yourself, because the knowledge is built into these skills.
What just pops into my head? So I know we've been talking about Mac and Linux and containers and those types of things. Does this work on Windows too?
Yeah, so Flox uses WSL2 to run on the Linux side of Windows. We've got people on our team that are, Windows is their everyday workstation. And so they switch into that kind of Linux terminal perspective, personality on their Windows environments. We don't have native Windows support. There are some people in the Nix ecosystem that are exploring it. But there's a lot of differences in the way that at least Mac and Linux are much more similar in the way that they have like the, kind of their primitives. Whereas like, the Windows has the Windows registry and some other kind of oddities that are different. So yeah, it's a WSL2 works great for people that are on Windows, but that's the way that a Windows person would use Flox.
Got it. Okay. And I think that makes a lot of sense for sure.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that question too, Cecil, because I think it's important to call out the fact that, not everybody is only on Mac. And actually, I'm curious, does Flox work pretty well though when you've got developers that are maybe working off of Windows and Mac together on the same project?
Yeah, it really does. So, you saw earlier when in the demo that I did, how I was in it was the same exact files. I didn't go to the Windows version, or I'm sorry, the Mac version, and then switch to a Linux version. It was the same files. I typed Flox activate, and we have at the bottom of it, there's a lock file where if I'm on, and so this is, I think, really important. There's a big difference, and people who work with containers probably have felt this a lot. Sometimes a container will be available on x64, but not available on ARM64, right? And have you ever encountered that? Like where you,
sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So Flox, the way we work is most of these packages in the Nix ecosystem are portable across Linux, Mac, as well as x64, ARM64. And so those permutation differences are kind of absorbed by just inherently in the package management that we do. So you don't really have to think about it. So that's really helpful when you're in CI and you don't know if you're going to get an x64 or an ARM64 runner. It'll work the same way, because the same, yes, at the bottom of it, there's a different, platform architecture, but the tree package or the wget package or the curl package, they all compile down to those systems. And so we kind of hide those differences from you and make it really easy to use and be portable.
Nice. Well, great. Well, James, thank you for going through all this. And let me do my usual wrap up of, I've got right now up on the screen, I'm showing the Flox site. So for anybody who is following along and wants to learn more later, please check it out. I've also got the Flox GitHub repo and GitHub organization, so you can go there and look at all the different repos and dig in if you want to contribute to the community. Pardon me. We also have the Flox M5, as James had shared before. And then Cecil, I've got up on the screen, you have just launched our validated patterns at Temporal. And so this is a new resource to share about different patterns and how to think about them, especially for, anything that you're building in relation to Temporal. Cecil, was there anything else you wanted to mention in relation to this? Because I know this was a really big and wonderful project that you worked through recently.
Yeah, for sure. This was a great partnership between our developer relations team, our friends in Docs, our friends in the Solutions Architects org. And what we did was we just took a lot of those learnings we got from speaking to customers, speaking to developers, and a lot of the suggestions, recommendations. I try not to say best practices because best is relative. But a lot of those recommendations that we like to give for folks based on what they're building, we're like, hey, instead of just having like these one-on-one meetings and sharing PDFs and docs across folks, let's just document it and give it a URL so we can share it with everybody and not just a select group of folks. And so that's essentially what you'll see here is the guidance that we share with a lot of our customers and, you know, other developers that have been either building on Temporal for a long time or they're new to Temporal and they're just wanting to understand how to apply it to a particular use case.
So yeah, check that out. It's up, and you can see the links here, and we'll of course have that later in our descriptions for on YouTube once this is posted out live. A couple other things to mention. Tomorrow, Melissa, who's one of our wonderful developer advocates, she is running She Ships, which is AI agents in production, is the main focus for that. It's our Pride edition, and also happy Pride for all those who are out there. And during this event, I'm actually going to be speaking. I'm going to be talking about human in the loop. So would love to say hi if you make it to the event next week in San Francisco. If you didn't know this, AI Engineer World Fair is happening. This is this conference here in San Francisco. It will be a big get together for everybody to dive into how to really build AI into production. Cornelia, who's also one of our developer advocates, is going to be there speaking about MCP. I will be there also talking about human in the loop. You will be able to find us at the booth. Melissa's also going to be there. And of course, James, I know we were chatting right before that, of course, Flox and you will be there. So you should come find all of us and say hello. And so that's all next week. The week after that, I'm actually going to be in Vancouver. I'm going to be at a PyLadies meetup and speaking also a little bit more around agentic loops and human in the loop. So please feel free to give me a shout or come say hi again in Vancouver. Would love to see you. And the next Vibe Check, we'll have a little bit of a break, but we'll be back July 15th. And we're going to get into making agentic building out your agentic go-to-market stack. So come back to check out Vibe Check in July. And of course, if you want to get into Temporal, it's free and open source as well. So feel free to jump into our GitHub and explore. And yeah, James, thank you for diving into, sharing with how to make your environments durable and sustainable, and repeatable and shareable. How many bulls can I apply here? But no, thank you for taking the time to come and share all this with us at Vibe Check. Really appreciate it. Cecil, appreciate the fact that you're here as a co-host with me today. Really good to see both of you. Any last parting words as I say goodbye to everybody who was wonderful to join, like Ian? Thank you, Ian, for being on there. But yeah, anything else?
All good. Thank you.
All good. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. We will see you next time. And yeah, have fun hacking.
Bye, folks.